2015, ultimately sentenced to more than 200 years in prison.
While the majority of police officers uphold their duties with honor and integrity, a small number have misused their authority, eroded public trust, and committed serious crimes.
Holtzclaw convicted after 13 women accused him,
ranging from brutal murders to involvement in organized crime. In this exploration, we will delve into the stories of these 10 officers, examining the evidence against them and the penalties they faced for their actions.
So go to your cage and think about how you squeezed the life and breath out of my daughter and grandson.
Number 1. Wayne Jenkins was a former Baltimore, Maryland police officer and leader of the Gun Trace Task Force, a specialized unit tasked with investigating violent crimes and illegal firearms trafficking. Jenkins had more than a decade of service before his career took a dark turn in a widespread corruption scandal. The investigation into Jenkins and his task force began in 2015 when the FBI received a tip about unit members committing robberies while on duty. Subsequently, an extensive investigation revealed that Jenkins and his team engaged in a range of illegal activities, including extortion, theft, drug dealing, and evidence tampering. As the task force leader, Jenkins orchestrated many of these illegal actions. They routinely robbed drug dealers and individuals they suspected had cash and drugs. They would then profit by selling the stolen items on the streets. Additionally, they planted evidence on suspects to bolster their cases and secure convictions. Their criminal activities came to light when they unknowingly robbed an FBI informant in 2017. This event triggered a thorough investigation, exposing the full extent of their corruption. In 2017, Jenkins and 6 other officers faced federal racketeering charges. The case against Jenkins and the Gun Trace Task Force became one of the most extensive corruption investigations in Baltimore Police Department history. It revealed significant flaws in the department's internal accountability systems, highlighting a lack of oversight and a culture of impunity. In 2018, Jenkins pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including racketeering, robbery, and filing false reports. He received a 25-year federal prison sentence without the possibility of parole. Jenkins's sentencing was a pivotal moment in the investigation, serving as a reminder that law enforcement would not tolerate corruption. This case underscored the significance of integrity in law enforcement and the severe impact of corruption on public trust and safety. While the majority of police officers are dedicated and honest, it is essential to hold those engaged in corrupt activities accountable. The Jenkins case emphasizes the importance of robust oversight and accountability mechanisms to prevent corruption and ensure that officers uphold their duty to serve and protect their communities. Wayne Jenkins's case garnered such widespread attention and controversy that it became the inspiration for a television show. The dramatic real-life events and the exposure of corruption within law enforcement made for compelling storytelling. The TV series focused on the rise and fall of Wayne Jenkins, his role as the leader of the Gun Trace Task Force, and the extensive investigation that led to his arrest and conviction. Number 2. Michael Dautro, a police officer in Edison, New Jersey, committed a series of crimes, including arson, conspiracy to commit official misconduct, and stalking. In 2013, Dautro set fire to the home of a superior officer with whom he had a dispute. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the officer's family, including 2 children, was inside the house at the time. Dautro also attempted to burn down the home of another police officer he viewed as a rival. In addition to arson, Dautro faced charges of conspiracy to commit official misconduct for using police resources to access information related to individuals involved in a lawsuit against him. His legal problems escalated when he stalked his former girlfriend and filed false police reports against her. Dautro misused his position as a police officer to harass and intimidate her, even going as far as installing a tracking device on her car. He was charged with stalking, falsifying a police report, and computer theft. In 2017, Dautro pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit official misconduct and 1 count of arson. In exchange for his plea, prosecutors dropped the remaining charges. He received a 20-year prison sentence and is not eligible for parole until he serves at least 17 years. The case of Michael Dautro serves as a stark reminder of the necessity of upholding the law, even for those in positions of authority. Dautreux's actions constituted a clear abuse of his power as a police officer and put the lives of innocent people in danger. It underscores the importance of rigorous vetting and monitoring of law enforcement officers to prevent such abuses. Furthermore, this case emphasizes the need for accountability and consequences for individuals engaged in criminal behavior, especially when it involves stalking and harassment. It is crucial to provide resources and support for victims of these crimes while ensuring that perpetrators are held accountable for their actions. Number 3. Daniel Holtzclaw, a former Oklahoma City police officer, was convicted of sexually assaulting multiple women while on duty. These crimes occurred between December 2013 and June 2014, when Holtzclaw patrolled a low-income neighborhood. Holtzclaw deliberately targeted vulnerable women, many of whom had outstanding warrants or criminal histories, believing they would be less likely to report the assaults. He abused his authority, coercing these women into sexual acts and threatening them with arrest if they refused. The initial revelation of Holtzclaw's crimes came when a woman reported a case during a traffic stop. This report triggered an investigation that uncovered a pattern of abuse spanning several months. In total, 13 women came forward with allegations against Holtzclaw. Their accounts revealed a disturbing pattern of Holtzclaw using his position to intimidate and manipulate them. He frequently escalated searches or pat-downs into sexual assaults, made suggestive comments, and demanded sexual favors in exchange for leniency. Throughout his trial, Holtzclaw maintained his innocence, claiming that the women had fabricated the allegations as part of a conspiracy against him. Nevertheless, the jury found him guilty on 18 counts, and the judge sentenced Holtzclaw to 263 years in prison. Holtzclaw's crimes devastated his victims, many of whom were already grappling with poverty, addiction, or mental health issues. They were left traumatized and ashamed, with limited resources for support or justice. The case of Daniel Holtzclaw serves as a disturbing example of the power dynamics and systemic issues contributing to police brutality and sexual violence. It underscores the complex intersection of race, class, and gender in cases of sexual assault. Holtzclaw primarily targeted women of color who were struggling with poverty, addiction, or mental illness, making them especially vulnerable to abuse and less likely to receive support or justice. This case also raises ethical questions about the role of law enforcement in society. Citizens entrust police officers with the responsibility of protecting and serving their communities. When officers abuse that power, they not only harm individuals but also erode the public's trust in law enforcement. It underscores the need for accountability, transparency, and reform within the criminal justice system to address systemic inequalities and prevent such abuses from occurring in the future. Number 4. Zachary Wester, a former Jackson County, Florida sheriff's deputy, faced accusations of planting drugs on motorists during traffic stops and wrongfully arresting them. The investigation into Wester's actions began in 2018 after a Jackson County prosecutor noticed irregularities in his cases and reported them to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. The FDLE investigation uncovered a consistent pattern of misconduct and abuse of power that had persisted for years, ultimately leading to Wester's arrest and conviction on multiple charges. According to the FDLE, Wester routinely conducted unlawful searches of vehicles during traffic stops and placed drugs or contraband on motorists. He then arrested them on false charges and filed false reports to conceal his actions. In some instances, he even stole money from those he arrested. The investigation revealed numerous cases of misconduct, including at least 12 instances of wrongful arrests on drug charges. In one troubling incident, Wester was caught on his body camera planting illegal substances in a woman's car. In another, he arrested a man on drug charges after discovering a syringe in the man's truck, although later examination showed the syringe contained no drugs. In August 2019, Wester was terminated from his deputy sheriff position. In July 2020, he was arrested and faced multiple charges, including racketeering, official misconduct, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, and drug possession. He also faced perjury charges for lying under oath during a 2018 custody hearing. In May 2021, Wester was found guilty of 19 out of the 67 charges against him, including racketeering, official misconduct, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, and drug possession. In July 2021, He received a 12-year prison sentence for his crimes, and the judge ordered him to pay restitution to his victims. Zachary Wester's case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of holding law enforcement officers accountable for their actions, even when they abuse their power. It underscores the need for transparency and thorough investigations to maintain public trust in the criminal justice system. Number 5. Dennis Perkins, a former Louisiana police officer, faced conviction for sexual crimes against children. The abuse came to light in 2017 when a victim disclosed it to a school counselor, who promptly reported it to law enforcement. Perkins was arrested in August 2017 and charged with 60 counts of child sexual abuse. During the trial, victims testified about the abuse they endured from Perkins. The prosecution presented additional evidence, including text messages and photographs that corroborated the victims' accounts. In his defense, Perkins alleged that the allegations were part of a conspiracy against him and claimed the victims had been coached to lie. Despite his defense, the judge sentenced him to 100 years in prison with no possibility of parole. Perkins's case gained national attention due to his previous career as a police officer. He had worked for various law enforcement agencies, including the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, the Baton Rouge Police Department, and the Louisiana Attorney General's Office. His conviction raised questions about how he continued working in law enforcement despite prior misconduct allegations. Following Perkins' conviction, his wife, Cynthia Perkins, was also arrested and charged with obstruction of justice. She was accused of bribing one of the victims to recant their testimony and attempting to intimidate this witness. Cynthia Perkins pled guilty to the charges, and as part of the plea deal, the judge sentenced her to 41 years in prison. Number 6. Braulio Gonzalez, a former lieutenant with the Miami-Dade Police Department, faced allegations of sexually molesting 2 young girls, including a family member, at gunpoint. He was charged with 7 counts of lewd and lascivious molestation of a child and 1 count of kidnapping. The alleged incidents occurred over a 2-year period, starting when the victims were 10 years old, from 2011 to 2013. The kidnapping charge was related to Gonzalez's initial encounter with one of the minors. He was accused of waking her up, using a firearm to threaten her, and instructing her to follow him. Gonzalez then led the victim to his bedroom, where the reported sexual assaults occurred repeatedly over the next 2 years. Gonzalez was arrested in 2018 after one of the victims disclosed the abuse to her psychologist. While awaiting trial, he was placed under house arrest, and the department continued to pay his salary. 9 months after his indictment, another victim came forward, leading to Gonzalez's incarceration pending trial. Throughout the legal proceedings, he maintained his innocence, but was ultimately convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, and he is currently appealing the verdict. Police records indicated that Gonzalez allegedly assaulted other women before the charges that led to his conviction. 3 of his ex-girlfriends reported injuries, including broken noses and arms, allegedly caused by Gonzalez. Police reports also revealed that he had pointed a firearm at 2 of the women. Despite these incidents, Gonzalez did not lose his job with the Miami-Dade police force. Number 7. Kenneth Blue's actions as a former police officer shocked both the community and law enforcement. One particularly heinous crime was the murder of Jennifer Webb, a 32-year-old pregnant woman. Reports suggested that Blue was the father of Webb's unborn child, but he was married and sought to conceal their affair. Blue allegedly lured Webb to a predetermined location under the pretense of discussing child support. There, he reportedly shot her and left her to perish. A passing motorist discovered Webb's body and alerted 911. Investigators linked Blue to the crime scene through evidence such as a bullet casing and tire tracks. Additionally, an inmate who had shared a cell with Blue came forward, claiming that Blue had confessed to the murder. During the trial, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of evidence against Blue, including DNA proof of his paternity of Webb's unborn child. The defense attempted to argue that Blue was not mentally competent at the time of the murder. Nevertheless, the jury rejected this claim and found him guilty of first-degree murder. Blue received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole, with the hope that it would provide some form of justice for Jennifer Webb and her family. The case prompted a review of police procedures and protocols, as well as increased awareness about domestic violence and the risks associated with police officers who misuse their authority. Kenneth Blue's case underscores the potential dangers when individuals in positions of authority abuse their power. As a police officer, he was entrusted to safeguard the community, but instead, he committed a grave crime and concealed an affair. The repercussions of his actions were devastating, not only for Jennifer Webb but for her family, the community, and the reputation of law enforcement as a whole. While Blue's sentencing provided some closure for those affected by the crime, it also raised essential questions about the necessity for enhanced oversight and accountability for law enforcement officials. In the aftermath of the case, many have called for improved training and support for police officers, along with increased scrutiny of officers who display signs of mental illness or instability. Number 8. David Carrick, a former British Army member, joined the Metropolitan Police as an officer in 2001. In 2009, he became part of the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Team. However, as early as 2002, allegations of domestic abuse surfaced against him. Despite multiple complaints about his conduct, Carrick was recertified as an armed police officer in 2017. His colleagues referred to him as Bastard Dave due to his reputation for cruelty. Between 2003 and 2020, Carrick met several women on dating apps like Badoo and Tinder, subsequently subjecting them to abuse and sexual assault. He exploited his position as an armed police officer to gain their trust, controlling them through physical and emotional abuse. Carrick physically and sexually assaulted his victims and confined them in small spaces. In October 2021, another woman reported that Carrick had sexually assaulted her a year earlier. She came forward in light of the kidnapping, sexual assault, and tragic death of Sarah Everard by another Metropolitan Police officer. Carrick was arrested and suspended from police duty. Initially, he pleaded not guilty to all charges, but in December 2022, at the Old Bailey Criminal Court in central London, Carrick admitted to 49 charges, including 24 counts of sexual assault involving 12 female victims. On January 16, 2023, at Southwark Crown Court, he pleaded guilty to 4 more charges. Following Carrick's conviction, the Metropolitan Police re-examined past claims of domestic abuse or sexual offenses involving Met Office officers and staff, investigating approximately 1,000 of its 45,000 employees. Carrick's sentencing commenced on February 6, 2023, at Southwark Crown Court. He received 36 life sentences, with a minimum term of 30 years and 239 days. This means he must serve that duration in prison before becoming eligible for parole, which is slated for May 2, 2052. Number 9. Wayne Couzens, a former Metropolitan Police officer with nearly a decade of service, worked in the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, the same unit where David Carrick served. Both misused their authority as police officers to commit serious crimes against vulnerable women. Couzens was convicted in March 2021 of the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of Sarah Everard. She was abducted while walking home from a friend's house in South London and later found in a wooded area in Kent. This case sparked widespread outrage and protests against violence targeting women in the UK. During his trial in September and October 2021, Couzens pleaded guilty to all 3 charges. The court heard how he used his police training and equipment, including handcuffs and a police ID, in the abduction, sexual assault, and tragic loss of Sarah Everard. In December 2021, Couzens received a whole-life prison sentence, ensuring he will never be released. The judge criticized his betrayal of the public's trust and noted his lack of remorse. Everett's family and women's rights advocates welcomed the sentence. Couzens' case raised concerns about violence against women in the UK and initiated broader discussions about police treatment of women. The Metropolitan Police faced criticism for its handling of the case, especially during the vigil for Everard and its response to allegations of sexual misconduct by officers. In response, the UK government introduced measures to combat violence against women, including a new police watchdog to investigate misconduct complaints and the appointment of a victims commissioner to support crime victims. Additionally, a new law, the Police, Crime, Sentencing, and Courts Bill, was introduced. featuring stricter penalties for crimes against women and enhanced measures to protect victims of domestic abuse. Number 10. Michael Valda, a former New York City police officer, was convicted of second-degree murder in the tragic death of his 8-year-old son, Thomas Valva. He received a 40-year-to-life prison sentence. The case unfolded on January 17, 2020, when Michael Valva called 911 to report that his son, Thomas, had fallen at home and was unresponsive. Thomas was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead. However, an autopsy revealed that Thomas had died from hypothermia, leading investigators to classify it as a homicide. Further inquiry uncovered that Thomas had suffered severe abuse from Michael Valva and his fiancée, Angela Polina, who was also charged with second-degree murder. As punishment for bedwetting, Thomas and his older brother Anthony were forced to sleep in an unheated garage where temperatures plummeted as low as 19 degrees Fahrenheit, -7 degrees Celsius, causing Thomas to develop severe hypothermia. Prosecutors presented evidence that Michael Valva had a history of mistreating his children, including Thomas and Anthony. His ex-wife, Justina Zabka Valva, had reported his abusive behavior and neglect to Child Protective Services. Despite these reports, Michael Valva retained custody of his children. During the trial, jurors heard audio recordings in which Michael and Polina callously mocked Thomas as he struggled for breath. The recordings also captured Michael Valva's disturbing statement that he didn't care whether Thomas lived or not. In March 2021, Michael Valva was convicted of second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child, receiving a 40-year-to-life prison sentence. Angela Polina faced the same conviction and sentencing. This case ignited outrage and calls for reform in New York State's child welfare system. Critics accused Child Protective Services of failing to take action despite multiple abuse reports. Lawmakers proposed reforms to enhance the system's responsiveness to child abuse and neglect reports. While most law enforcement officers serve with integrity, this case highlights the importance of holding those who abuse their power accountable. Police departments must establish robust oversight mechanisms to ensure public trust and safety.